Hey, do you want a pirate campaign that will get your players hooked? Well, it's Kraken Week, a community event organized by Genie D and Pointy Hat, where tabletop RPG Youtubers make videos about the ocean and give you an excuse to discover a bunch of new channels you might have not seen before. So if this is your first time seeing my channel, hi, I'm Trek. I'm a game designer and I make videos about some advanced techniques for game masters. And today, I will use a 3-year-long pirate campaign I have run as an example so I can talk about adventure structure. Let's say you have a vague idea of a campaign you'd like to run. How do you turn that idea into an adventure your players will care about? Let's talk about that. Everyone has a different starting point when creating a campaign. Personally, I wanted to run a campaign inspired by One Piece, with a bit of Atlantis sprinkled on top of it. In other words, my starting point was a tone. The thing is, pirate media exists on a pretty wide spectrum. On one end, you've got pirates depicted as dirty, violent criminals. It's dark, grimy, smelly. Rum is cheap and human life is even cheaper. It frequently falls into the horror genre too. You'll often find undead pirates or Lovecraftian monsters lurking in the abyss, waiting for you to give them an opportunity to stare back. The sea is mysterious and dangerous. It will remind you time and time again that it is the biggest pond and you are the smallest fish. And I guess, because game masters are deeply disturbing people, it turns out that most pirate-themed RPG books fall into this style. You can check out Deficient Master's video about Pirate Borg or Indestructible's review of Call from the Deep for two great examples of that style. But One Piece and Atlantis are on the exact opposite end of the spectrum, where you've got pirates depicted as charming rascals who are all about freedom, passion and witty one-liners. They portray the members of a pirate crew as being a found family with unbreakable bonds. It's all about having an adventurous spirit, buckling some swashes and sticking it to the man. The sea is beautiful, it's full of life, colorful, and rather than a place of dread, it's a place of endless opportunities where you can go anywhere, do what you want to do, and be who you want to be. There might still be danger, but it only serves to portray the pirates as plucky for facing it. If regular D&D goes from grimdark to heroic fantasy, then I guess pirate media goes from grim-damp to anti-heroic fantasy. So when I started working on this campaign, I also picked up a third-party book called Seas of Vodari that felt more in line with what I was trying to do. And so when I heard about Kraken Week, I reached out to its publishers, Angry Fish Games, to ask if they'd like to sponsor a video. And they agreed, so now on top of talking about a book I like, I get to also give you a discount code for it. So yeah, I wanted One Piece meets Atlantis, and Vodari is pretty much exactly that. As you can probably guess from its world map, and the giant permanent hypercane in the center of it, this is a world where most of the land sank under the waves after a divine conflict. So now you've got all of your usual fantasy folks like goblins and wood elves stuck on a bunch of tiny islands trying to rebuild and reinvent themselves. The world is filled with ruins from before the catastrophe, both above and underneath the waves, which is a great way to introduce the concept of dungeons to your world building without breaking anything. There's also a bunch of factions for the players to interact with, and of course, there's always the big mystery of what would you find if you manage to reach the center of the storm. On the mechanics side, you've got a bunch of player options, as well as some pretty solid rules for ship customization, a 50-page bestiary, and a starter adventure. This book, as well as its sequel, Under the Seas of Vodari, are available both as PDF and hardcover on tribality.com, and until the end of July, if you use the discount code KrakenWeek, you'll get 10% off and you'll support my channel. Now let's get into the meat and potatoes and talk about how to design an outline for a pirate campaign. For those of you who haven't read or watched One Piece yet, it's a treasure hunt story where thousands of pirates all around the world are all looking for the same treasure, the One Piece, which was left behind by the previous king of the pirates. But while Eiichiro Oda, the author, decided what the One Piece would be before he even started drawing the first panel of the manga, the rest of us still don't know what it is, 25 years and 25,000 pages later. All we know is that there's an evil, totalitarian world government who really doesn't want people to find it. That's it. But it doesn't really matter. Sure, people are curious and there's a lot of fan theories going around about what the One Piece might be, but it's kind of like Pulp Fiction, where you never really learn what's inside the suitcase, but you still have a good time because the characters and the journey they're on are just that entertaining. So let's take a look at that journey. One Piece has a story device which is great for treasure hunts, the poneglyphs. This is going to be a spoiler for chapter 818 or episode 770, which, to be fair, is over 8 years old at this point, but if you do want to avoid the spoiler, skip ahead to this timestamp. Okay, here we go. What the Mink tribe reveals to the Straw Hat crew is that they have one of the 4 road poneglyphs. Each of these giant, indestructible red stone tablets tells the story of one island from the thousands and thousands of islands in the world of One Piece. And if someone managed to read all 4 road poneglyphs, they would point to 4 islands on a map, draw an X, and wherever the center of that X lands, this is where the One Piece is located. This is an incredibly smart plot device on so many levels. Let's break it down. First, it doesn't matter in which order you find the 4 poneglyphs, which is great for a tabletop campaign because it means if we adopt this plot hook, then we already have a non-linear adventure by default. Our players get to decide which of their 4 objectives they want to tackle first. Then, because the poneglyphs are physical objects, you get to come up with an interesting answer to the question is, who has them right now? In One Piece, we learn that the Minks have one, which they share with the protagonists after being rescued by them, but they also say that 2 of the most dangerous pirates in the world, Big Mom and Kaido, also have one each. So you get to come up with potential allies, rivals, quest givers, and anything in between, and fill your world with factions for your players to butt heads with. But because it's a knowledge-based MacGuffin, you also have a situation where more than one person can have the MacGuffin at any given time. What that means is that each faction who owns a poneglyph, or even just a copy of one, has a vested interest in keeping it hidden, protecting it from pesky adventurers, building an entire dungeon around it. It's also a plot device that lends itself very well to downtime, which is very important for the pacing of a campaign. If you've ever tried springing an end-of-the-world prophecy on your players at level 3, you're probably all too familiar with what happens when you don't leave space for downtime in a D&D campaign.
Somebody once told me.
2 weeks later.
Smash.
The moment you place the urgency on the campaign's main objective, you create a situation where your players can't really justify taking a single day of downtime. Every waking moment has to be spent trying to put out the giant fire. But in One Piece, urgency only exists within a narrative arc. The fire is ignited when you reach a location of a poneglyph, and it's put out when you leave with that poneglyph. It's a very healthy pacing where you still get to have your intense dramatic moments, but you also get some very welcome downbeats before and after each battle. But between the different narrative arcs, the players are free to rest, do some low-stakes roleplay, try to tackle some personal objectives, etc. In fact, if you watch One Piece, while it is a pirate adventure, you might have noticed that most of the actual adventuring only happens once the crew has landed on a new island. They have a ship, but it's more interested in making that ship feel like a home than making it feel like a weapon. There's usually 1 or 2 of what we would call naval encounters per arc, but most of the time they're used to do some exposition and some foreshadowing about the upcoming arc. There's also a different aspect to this plot device, which is that it creates a lot of mysteries for your world building. Who created those tablets? Why and how? Because clearly they were made using techniques that have been lost to time. So you can trick your players into caring about your world building by tying it to a big shiny treasure that they want. There's just one tiny problem with this plot device. It tries to be all meta and cute by having the 4 poneglyphs draw an X on your world map, which literally marks the spot for the treasure, and that is super charming. But in geometry, if you have just 3 poneglyphs, you're already restricting the search from the entire world all the way down to the edges of this one triangle. No matter where the 4th poneglyph points to, the One Piece is going to have to be somewhere on these 3 lines. And while Luffy is way too dumb of a protagonist to realize this, if your players have gone past 5th grade, they can probably untangle that mystery before Luffy does. So we're probably going to have to adapt it a bit. But the idea of splitting your treasure map into 3 or 4 different MacGuffins that more than one person can have at the same time, that is absolute gold. By doing that, One Piece has created a perfect structure for a treasure hunt campaign. So we're going to do what pirates do best and steal Oda's entire life's work to turn it into a D&D campaign. So how do we do that? Let's break it down. We know we want our players to gather 3 to 4 MacGuffins. I personally limited it to 3 just to keep my campaign a bit shorter and make sure we still have some space for side quests without having to reach extremely high levels where D&D tends to break down. Then we know we want this to be a pirate campaign, so in terms of verbs, we probably want something that feels adequately piratey. We could go with sail to, for example, but let's go with steal. We're not sure at this point what we're going to steal or who we're going to steal it from, but we are sure of one thing, which is that our quest will feel a lot more piratey if it's about stealing something than if it's about saving someone, for example. Then we're probably going to need an introduction, where the players get to learn about these 3 MacGuffins, and a conclusion where they get to use the 3 MacGuffins to go find the treasure. Now, because this is a tabletop RPG, I would prefer giving my players a choice about who to steal from, rather than force them to become enemies with a predetermined faction I chose for them. So what I'm going to do is split these 3 chapters at the center into 2 parts. First, the players need to steal a special ship, like a submarine, an airship, or a spelljammer. Then they can use these special ships to sail to a location that they would normally be unable to get to. A dungeon at the bottom of the sea, another one in the plane of air, and one last one in the astral sea. And that is where the 3 MacGuffins actually are. Now, having a choice of who to steal from is nice, but it's not going to be an informed choice unless I create a way for me to introduce my players to the different factions they can steal from. So let's add 4 optional side quests, 1 for each faction, and introduce these side quests through travel encounters. Each of these 4 side quests gives the players a choice between joining that faction if they mesh with its ideals, fighting that faction, or ignoring it altogether. To me, factions are all about going, okay, you've told me you wanted to be pirates, that's the premise we agreed on for this campaign. Now, I'm going to spend the rest of this campaign asking you exactly what kind of pirate you want to be. And any player character who has a strong opinion about this will generally want to participate in those side quests. But just in case, those side quests will also come with the promise of a bunch of rewards in the form of ship upgrades, new allies, magic items, etc. But here's the thing, if the players choose to participate in these side quests, then regardless of whether they decide to join that faction or to fight it, they are going to gain new enemies. I'll give you one example. Right after the introduction, my players sailed to the nearest city, which was under the control of a totalitarian colonial empire. And almost as soon as they landed, the players were approached by 2 groups. First, a group of young, scrappy and hungry rebels asked if they would like to help boot the evil government out of the colony. And of course, the pirates who would help them establish a new free nation would probably be held as heroes. Then, all of 10 minutes later, they were approached by a government official who offered to double their choices by offering them a privateer license, some allies in high places, and a chance to be in the room where things happen. That is, if they would just infiltrate the rebellion and help the Empire tear it down from the inside by leaking some juicy intel. Join the Empire and you inherit its many enemies. Join the rebels and all you're doing is freeing one colony. The Empire is still around, and they still have a spelljammer that you might as well steal, right? With this, we have what I think is a pretty solid outline. If we start our players at 3rd level and make them gain 1 level whenever they finish one of these quests, then we can already know that the campaign will last until 10th to 14th level, depending on how many of the side quests they complete. The only thing that's left to do is to decide what our treasure is, so we can work backwards and decide what our MacGuffins are. Here's what I came up with, a weird hybrid of One Piece, Vodari, and of course Morrowind, because it wouldn't be a real critical eye video if I didn't drop at least one Elder Scrolls reference somewhere. A long time ago, there was an ancient empire of elves whose magic was extremely advanced. They used glowing blue crystals made of pure magic to power various constructs and artifacts. Until, one day, the ocean swallowed the empire whole for an unknown reason. Nowadays, countless pirates, privateers, explorers and adventurers of all kinds are looking for the cave where the elves used to harvest their mana crystals from. As the legend goes, whoever finds that cave first will become wealthier than every single country in the world combined. And at the start of the campaign, this is all I told my players. But the truth is that the elves didn't actually harvest their crystals from a cave. Instead, they slew their own head deity, the goddess of the moon, and the crystals are shards carved from her giant heart. However, those crystals are extremely unstable and they will explode at the slightest shock. So even if you knew where the remains of the goddess are, you wouldn't be able to actually harvest them unless you knew exactly how to chisel it properly by using 3 specific magic items to protect yourself. One day the Elven Empire died, and his two eldest sons fought over the right of succession. But during their battle, the heart of the moon goddess was accidentally struck, causing a massive explosion which shattered the moon and caused a small chunk of it to crash into the world below, creating a giant wave which swallowed all but the tallest mountains. The heart still remains in the ruins of the Imperial Palace on the moon, but the 3 artifacts required to carve it have been destroyed in the explosion. In order to resume work on the heart, someone would need to find the blueprints to these 3 magic items and then craft them. And with this we have our MacGuffins, the blueprint. All that's left is actually introducing them. How do we do that? Well, it also wouldn't be a real critical eye video if I didn't drop some nugget of ultra nerdy game design theory that happened to solve the exact problem I'm talking about, how to write a good introduction in this case. In a 2006 study by Joseph C. Nunes and Xavier Drez, they got a car wash to start handing out loyalty cards. But the cards came in 2 kinds. The first one had 8 circles, and if the customer got the 8 circles stamped, they would get a free car wash. The second one had 10 circles instead of 8, but 2 of them came pre-stamped. So you would still only need to get 8 stamps in order to get your free wash. What the researchers observed is that the people who got the pre-punched card redeemed their free wash almost twice as often as the people who got the regular card. This study showed a phenomenon psychologists called the endowed progress effect. Basically, if you give people an objective, but then you give them a head start, rather than have them start at the beginning, they are much more likely to want to complete that objective. It ties into the sunk cost fallacy, where people don't want to lose the progress they've already made, even though in this case, they didn't even have to sink a cost to make that progress in the first place. You just gave it to them. Game designers use this all the time to increase the likelihood people will continue playing their games, especially during the introduction, to give players a reason to stay for the long haul. For example, the game XCOM Enemy Unknown is about creating an elite squad of soldiers and keeping them alive by making them climb up in ranks and doing some R&D to upgrade their gear. But the game designers made sure that by the end of your tutorial mission, your one remaining soldier would already upgrade from the rank of rookie to the rank of squaddy, and that they would bring home the remains of the aliens they just fought so that you can start your first research project. That tutorial mission doesn't just teach you the mechanics of the game, it also sets you on the journey it wants you to go on eventually. So let's apply some of this to give this pirate campaign a good introduction. The game starts with the players shipwrecked after a storm. The players wake up stranded on a beach covered in sweat and salt water, with their ship so badly damaged it will take them a couple of weeks to repair it, minimum. And to make things worse, this novice pirate crew quickly realizes that the island they landed on happens to be Menesia, an island from which it is said nobody has ever come back. They explore a bit to look for food and eventually stumble upon some hunters in the jungle who are surprisingly welcoming. The hunters invite them to a feast to welcome them and celebrate the arrival of new people. And during the feast, the players realize that this entire island is the domain of a kind but very possessive dryad. She loves the community she's built and they love her back, but she can't risk it being discovered by the outside world. So she uses her magic to charm anyone who lands on Menesia and make sure they never want to leave. Except she's been doing this for a very, very long time, and as a result, Menesia happens to be the only place in the world where the oral tradition of the ancient Elven Empire is still alive. And during the banquet, one of the villagers starts singing a traditional folk song. It's an old ode to the 3 families of artisans who crafted the 3 magical artifacts capable of carving the heart of the moon goddess and creating a virtually infinite amount of mana crystals. And just like that, your players have a piece of knowledge that nobody else in the entire world, at least to their knowledge, has access to. If they manage to use it, they could become the wealthiest pirates in the world. All they have to do is find a way to leave the island, an idea that the Dryad would really prefer they did not entertain. So with this, the outline of this campaign is more or less complete. We have a pretty good idea of the tone we're shooting for, we have verbs that match that tone, we've made a lot of space for players' decision, and we made sure those decisions would be informed and that they would be motivated. And the cool thing is, while I used a pirate campaign as an excuse to talk about adventure structure, the logic and the techniques I've talked about here are pretty much universal. So my hope with this video is that maybe you've been inspired to pick up a pen and start thinking about an adventure you'd like to run for your friends. Thanks again to Seas of Vodari for sponsoring this video, and also massive thanks to my YouTube member for their support. If you'd like to help this channel, this is a really good way to do it. But if you can't, no worries. Just make sure you tell me in the comments which was your favorite video from this year's Kraken week. Now, a lot of you might be wondering how I handled vehicle combat during this pirate campaign. So if you're interested in that, here's a video that talks about exactly that topic. But in the spirit of Kraken Week, how about instead a video about how to turn the bad guys from Pirates of the Caribbean into 5e stat blocks? If that sounds cool, come check out this video by my friend Super Geek Mike. That's it for today's video. Until next time, have a good one.